Welcome everyone to the Department of Justice Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation Budget Development webinar. My name is Christina, and I will be your moderator for today. As we begin our presentation today, it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Angela Wade, with the Office of Justice Programs, Office of the Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So this afternoon, we are going to talk about how to develop or create your budget for the CTAS solicitation and application process. DOJ has a budget detail workbook that is designed especially for the CTAS application process. It combines the budget detail worksheet, the budget narrative, and budget summary into a single document. The good thing about this, everything is in one place. And one of the good reasons for the CTAS budget detail workbook, it would allow you to apply for more than one purpose area within the same workbook. So in short, you are only required to submit only one workbook, although you may be applying for several purpose areas at one time. So as you are preparing your CTAS budget, I want you to please make sure that you actually read through the solicitation and pay very close attention to those particular purpose areas that you plan on requesting funding for. There are very specific requirements for each purpose area. So when I say specific, I'm referring to some of the things that you may be required to include in your budget for a particular purpose area, as well as certain things or items that you may be allowed to include, and also those things that you are not allowed to include. So for example, purpose area number 9 has 2 separate meeting attendance requirements that you must include in your budget. There are also specific fact sheets available for each purpose area that you should read before developing your budget. You can find that information at the www.justice.gov/tribal website. Now, your budget should be as concrete and specific as possible, especially with your estimates. Your estimates should be reasonable. Your budget format should be clear as possible. You should be able to justify all expenses and be consistent in how you're presenting those expenditures. Now, as you are completing your CTAS budget, you should provide a detailed computation for each budget line item or category where funding is being requested. In addition to the budget detail, you must provide a budget narrative that clearly and concisely describes each category of estimated expenses that you have listed in the budget detail. The narrative must explain how all the costs were estimated, the basis for the cost, and how they are relevant to the program. All proposed costs are to be allowable, reasonable, allocable, and necessary for your grant program. Along with the budget detail and budget narrative, you will need a budget summary. But another good thing about the CTAS budget workbook, it will automatically create that budget summary for you once you have completed the budget detail and budget narrative. Now, the budget summary actually shows the total amount that is being requested in each budget category. With the CTAS budget summary, it will also show and summarize an amount that is being requested for each purpose area as well. So now let's take a look at the budget categories. We have personnel, fringe benefits, travel, equipment, supplies, construction, subaward/procurement, other, and indirect. Let's talk about the first budget category, which is personnel. The personnel category is for your staff members or employees within your organization that are going to be working on your grant program. So for the personnel category, you want to list out each position by title and name of the employee. That is, if the name of the employee is available. Next, you want to show their salary or rate of pay, their compensation. It could be annual, it could be hourly, it could be weekly, it could be monthly. You just need to let us know which. You will then need to show the amount of time they will be working on your particular project or program. When we say the amount of time, let's say, for example, your program is a 3-year grant. So you want to tell us, are they going to be working on your program for the whole 3 years? Are they only going to be working on it for the first year? Or are they only going to be working it for 2 years? You need to let us know that. And you need to tell us the percentage of time they're going to be working on the particular grant or program. Are they going to be 100% on this particular grant or program, or are they only going to be part-time on this particular program? One thing you need to be mindful of, if your organization currently pays a cost of living allowance or a COLA or a pay increase, you need to make sure that you include that within the personnel category as well. And one thing you'll hear me mention throughout this presentation is all your costs must be necessary, reasonable, allowable, and allocable to your grant program. So on the next slide, we're going to show the actual computation and how you should be presenting it to us. We will show a breakdown of what you will be submitting as far as basically your budget detail or your calculations or your computation. So in this slide here, you have the name of the employees listed, their actual position, their annual salary, the percentage of time they're going to be working on the program, and the amount of time they're going to be on the program. And then the budget detail worksheet will total out the total amount of compensation you are requesting for each one of these individuals to work on your grant program. Now, on the second half of the screen, you see where cost of living increase is included. It's very important that if your organization does pay cost of living increases, that you do include that. Otherwise, you may find that you will have to pay that out of your own organization's bank account. So along with these computations, you will need to include a budget narrative. And this slide here actually shows an example on how it looks in the CTAS budget detail workbook. At the top, you see the actual calculations. But what I want to show you is the narrative. Now, down at the bottom, in this example here for personnel, the narrative explains what each of these individuals will be doing or the work they will be performing on your particular grant program. It also has a statement on how much time they will be working on the particular grant program and how their salaries or their pay information was obtained. So it's very important that your narrative, for one, ties back to what you have in your budget detail, that is your calculations. It also explains how it supports the grant program, and it also shows where you got the information for what you are paying them. So the next budget category we're going to talk about are fringe benefits. Now, for fringe benefits, the first thing I want to tell you about fringe benefits should be for all of those individuals that you had listed in the personnel category. So for fringe benefits, they usually include items such as FICA, life insurance, health insurance, retirement, workman's compensation, etc. And again, costs must be necessary, reasonable, allowable, and allocable to your grant program. Next slide, please. So for the fringe benefits category, a lot of times your organization may have a particular fringe benefit rate that you're paying. So in this example here, the fringe benefit rate is 30.65%. So what we would like you to do is show us a breakdown of that percentage. What makes up that percentage? So on this example here, it shows you how we see how much of that 30.65% is FICA, how much is retirement, how much is workman's comp, and how much is health insurance. And then it is applied to your actual calculation. The next slide here, you'll be able to see what it looks like in the budget detail workbook. On the budget detail workbook, it has each individual that's receiving fringe benefits. It has the basis for the computation, and it also shows the rate. In the budget narrative, this budget narrative is a little bit brief, so I will probably send it back because I don't have enough information on what you're paying fringe benefits for. So in this narrative here, I would have liked to see what we saw on the previous slide, the breakdown of FICA, health insurance, workman's comp, etc. What makes up that 30.65%. And also, again, that sentence that's there is good. It shows you where that fringe benefit rate was attained. So it's basically the fringe benefit rate that they use for this particular organization.
Angela?
So the next, yes.
This is James. Would you be okay if I just said one thing on something that you said to emphasize one of your points?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay. So Angela made a very good point. Good afternoon, everyone. You've probably heard me on the other webinars. I'll be really brief. Angela made a really good point about how brief that budget narrative was in the example. If you remember from the webinar that I did last Tuesday, and then the webinar I did the week before that, one of the things that I emphasized when I touched very briefly on budget, it's important for two reasons. A, if you want our finance department to approve your budget, then it's going to need to have more information. The other part of that is when your peer reviewers are evaluating your application and your budget, and we as federal staff are doing the same, we're going to look to see if your budget narrative, at least from the programmatic side, your budget narrative and your program narrative match. Like if you're asking for all of this equipment and all of these items and all of the supplies in your budget, when we look at your program narrative, we need to see where it makes sense. Like, why do you need this? So not only does it make sense to have a good narrative here, but you want to make sure that these two, that basically your budget and your program narrative need to be parallel to each other. They need to be speaking. We need to look at one and get the picture from the other and vice versa. So just make sure that you have that succinct, because if I get it, I'll probably send it back before it even gets to Angela. Just because I know that they have a lot of budgets to review, and anything that we as program managers can do to help them out, we try to alleviate that up front. So thank you again, Angela. That was a great point.
Thank you, James. So the next category is the travel category. So the first thing you will need for this particular category is your organization's travel policy. Now I'm going to take a moment to talk about policies for a second. With everything you're doing for your particular grant, you need to have policies and procedures in place. You need to make sure those policies and procedures are up to date. And one of the things we will tell you that if your organization does not have a policy in place for certain things, then you need to follow the federal policy. But it's very important that you have policies in place and keep them up to date. One, it shows that you know how to manage your grant program and that you have things in place like your internal controls that may prevent grant fraud from occurring within your organization. So for the travel category, you need to know your organization's travel policy. You need to let us know what your travel policy is if you're using your own travel policy, because as a budget reviewer, if I receive your budget and you don't tell me what travel policy you're following, I'm going to automatically assume you're following the federal policy. And if you're following your own policy and I don't know that, then guess what? I'm going to probably send your budget back because I don't see that you're following the federal policy. So you need to tell us what travel policy you are actually following. Now, what we're looking for in a travel category, we want to see your computations. We want to know how many people from your organization are actually traveling. We want to know how this travel requirement or travel that you have included in your budget supports your particular grant program. Again, you need to let us know what your per diem rates you're using. And then you want to list out each item in the travel category separate. When I say each item, you need to show a separate line item for transportation, a separate line item for lodging, separate line item for meals, a separate line item for local travel if you're using local travel. So you want to make sure you list all of that out. So this is just an example of what it would look like in the budget detail workbook. It has the purpose for the travel, is the mandatory training, for example, the location. Now, a lot of times when you're budgeting for items in the travel category, it may be a required trip, but you don't always know where you're traveling to. So it's okay if you put to be determined. But if I'm not mistaken, and one of the program managers can correct me if I'm wrong, that with the CTAS budget, all the travel requirements that are in the purpose areas says to use Washington, D.C. as your travel destination as you're estimating your cost for your travel. So then you want to tell us what type of expense. That's when I talked about the different travel items, be it transportation, lodging, meals, local travel, or other, the basis for that item, and then the actual cost, the number of people that are traveling, and the number of trips that will be going on. Just to keep in mind that if you're following the federal policy for travel, as far as the per diem for meals, the per diem is 75% on the first and last day of your trip, and then full per diem on all the other days. So keep that in mind if you're following the federal travel policy. So in the narrative, again, as both me and James mentioned, this is kind of a short narrative. I would like to see a little bit more than that in a narrative. You want to tell us why are you traveling, who's traveling. You may need to explain some of your costs. Like for an example, for this particular travel category, there's something budgeting and other, $150 for 3 people. I would need to know a breakdown of what that other is. So you would need to explain that a little bit further. And again, in the narrative, you want to tell us the travel policy that you are actually following. So just make sure you're being very clear and you're itemizing everything out, and your calculations actually make sense. And again, your narrative should thoroughly explain your calculations, who's traveling, and why. So keep in mind, if you are hosting an event for OJP, using OJP funds, and you have 30 or more participants or attendees in your event, they could be federal or non-federal, any lodging costs for any of your attendees that need lodging must not go over the federal per diem rate for lodging. If you have less than 30 people attending your particular event, then you are exempt from this requirement. So if you want to know what the per diem rates that fall under the federal travel policy guidelines, you can go to the www.gsa.gov website. Then there's also additional information in the DOJ financial guide. Equipment. This is another category where you would need to know your organization's policy for equipment. Now, basically, you would need to know what your organization's policy is for capitalizing equipment. As always, if no policy exists, you must follow the federal policy. Now, for the federal policy for capitalizing equipment, it's a fair market value of $5,000 or more with a useful life of more than 1 year. So please let us know if you're budgeting anything in this category. Please let us know what policy you are following. So for this category, you want to list and describe each item of equipment that will be purchased and the cost per item. In the budget narrative, you want to state your capitalization policy you are following and how the equipment will be used to support your particular project or program. You may also want to describe the procurement method being used to obtain this equipment. If a piece of equipment does not fall within your organization's threshold for capitalizing equipment, then that particular equipment will need to go into the supply category. So basically, this slide just here talks about the federal policy for capitalizing equipment. Again, a fair market value of $5,000 or more with a useful life of more than 1 year. Now, if you have bought equipment under the federal policy and you no longer need it for criminal justice purposes, and the fair market value is less than $5,000, you can actually keep the equipment with no further obligation back to the awarding agency. However, if you do have that equipment and it's no longer needed for criminal justice purposes, if the fair market value is $5,000 or more, you can keep the equipment or you can sell it. However, if you do sell the equipment, any proceeds from selling that equipment must be returned to the awarding federal agency. So this slide just shows an example of what it looks like in the budget detail workbook. It has each item listed out, the number of items, and the cost. See, for here, it's 2 laptop computers. That's $2,500 each. So this will tell me if a unit costs $2,500, I should automatically know that they're not following the federal policy, because the federal policy's cost for capitalization is $5,000 or more. So it also lists a copier machine, 1 item at $2,000 each. One thing I want to point out with the equipment category, if you are buying things such as desktop computers or furniture, please be mindful of, you need to break it down to the smallest component. And furniture I want to use as a good example. I was recently reviewing a budget, and the applicant had furniture listed as the equipment. They had furniture with a cost of $6,000. So that raised a red flag in my book. One, because I didn't know what furniture could have been anything. It could have been a chair, a desk. So things like that, you need to break it down to its smallest component. Once they broke it down, it was a chair, a desk, a couple of bookcases, a laptop computer. So all those should have been broken out separately. Once they broke it out separately, it did not fall within the threshold for capitalizing equipment, so it had to go to the supplies category. So for the narrative here, it explains why these items are being purchased, how they're going to support the particular grant program, and it also has a statement of the capitalization policy or threshold that is being used. The supplies category. Now, the supplies category should include any expendable items and all those equipment items that fall under the capitalization threshold. So you want to list out each item by type and show how you calculated these costs. So basically, it has, in this example, will show cell phones, portable printers, Microsoft software, general office supplies. One, I want to talk about the cell phones and the Microsoft software for a minute. The cell phones and the Microsoft software are items that could possibly go in other budget categories. You'll run across that from time to time. There are some items that could possibly go in other budget categories. Like, for example, I know some of the accountants in OCFO in my office will see cell phones and Microsoft software and would prefer to see them in the other categories. So you may run across that sometimes after you submit your budget and it's being reviewed. If it gets sent back, and let's say you had Microsoft software and supplies and you've been asked to move it to other, do me a favor, go ahead and move it to other, because the goal is to go ahead and get your budget approved. I just wanted to point that out. There are some items that can fit more than one budget category, and those two are just good examples. So for your narrative for supplies, you want to explain the supply that's being acquired, how it's going to be used in the grant program, and how the costs for those were estimated. The construction category. Now, for construction costs are generally unallowable. However, minor repairs and renovations may be allowed. Now, for the CTAS program, if you're applying for funding for purpose area number 4, then you are allowed to incur costs in the construction category. You want to make sure that you read the solicitation to see what is allowable for this particular category. So for the detail, you want to provide a description of your particular project. Again, for purpose area number 4 is generally renovations. So you want to make sure that you have read the solicitation, you have talked to your program manager before you actually put money in this particular category. You want to provide a description of the project, estimate of the cost, and provide a breakdown of the costs that you're including in this category. This is a big category. We have subawards or subgrants. We have procurement contracts, and we also have consultants that are included in this category. Now, if you are subawarding some of your grant funds, you want to make sure that you list out each subaward or subgrant. You want to provide a description of the activities that are being carried out. And also you want to include a label that says subaward next to each item that you're listing as a subaward. For your procurement contracts, you want to describe the product or services that are being procured by the contract. You want to provide an estimate of the cost. If you are using a sole source over $250,000, then you will need to provide a separate sole source justification. Now, if you are using a sole source, you are including a sole source justification with your budget as attached. Please be mindful that if your budget is approved, that does not mean that your sole source justification has been approved. You will receive a separate approval for your sole source justification. If you have consultants, for each consultant, you will need to list out each consultant by name, if available, and the services being performed or provided. You want to include the estimated time that the consultant will be spending on the project and include any consultant fees. If you are paying a consultant more than $650 for an 8-hour day, then you will require an additional justification and prior approval from your program office. If your consultants will have expenditures associated with travel, you want to include them in the separate travel section that is part of this category. So for subawards, again, you want to list out each subaward, their duties, and their costs, and you want to include in the narrative for the subaward, your contracts, and your consultants. You also want to make sure in this category to include the procurement process that is being followed. Okay, so this is the bottom half in the budget detail workbook. It shows a separate section for some consultants. So for consultants, you want to include their daily fees under consultant fees, the service they're going to be provided, their rate, the number of days they're going to be working on your program, and it'll calculate out the total cost. If your consultant is traveling, you want to include that information under consultant travel. If they have any additional fees outside of their daily fees and the travel fees, you want to include that under consultant expenses. That could be if you're providing them computer equipment, office supplies, etc. The next category is the other category. Generally in the other category, this is where you will put things such as rent, telephone services, janitorial or security services, your utilities. You want to make sure that you list these costs out in detail. You want to show the quantity for each item, the basis used for the calculation, any monthly rates, the basis could be square footage, and the length of time if applicable. Next slide, please. So in this example here, you have rent. The rent is showing a basis of square feet. The quantity is 2,500, so that would tell me Rent is based on 2,500 square feet at a cost per square feet and amount of time the rent is going to be paid for this particular grant program, and also shows an example of telephone service being listed. In the narrative, it explains what the rent is for, how it's being calculated, and the same for the telephone service. Again, how I mentioned cell phones. Cell phones could either be in the other category or the supplies category. Indirect cost. If you have an approved indirect cost rate from your cognizant federal agency, you may be able to charge indirect costs to your particular grant program. If your organization has never had a negotiated and approved indirect cost rate agreement, then you may be able to utilize the de minimis rate. So for indirect costs, your description will be indirect costs. If you're using the de minimis rate, you want to put the de minimis rate in the description. You want to list out your base. The base could be direct salaries and fringe benefits, or just direct salaries. It could be modified total direct cost. So you want to show the base, your actual rate, and the workbook will calculate out the total cost. Now in the narrative, you want to explain your indirect cost rate. So in this example here, it shows the type of rate they have, the percentage. So it's a fixed rate. The percentage is 18%. It's based off direct salaries and fringe benefits. And you also want to show the cognizant federal agency that has approved your indirect cost rate agreement. So in this example here, it's the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and it shows the effective date of the indirect cost rate agreement. You also want to make sure that if you're charging indirect costs, you have an approved indirect cost rate agreement, that you attach a copy of your current indirect cost rate agreement. If you include indirect costs and your indirect cost rate agreement that you have attached is not current, what's going to happen is that funding that you have budgeted in indirect cost category will be put on hold until you provide a current indirect cost rate agreement. If you are eligible and you're electing to use the de minimis rate, you need to let us know in writing that you are electing to use the de minimis rate. So this is an example of your budget summary. The budget summary includes basically a summarized amount that you are requesting funding for each budget category. It will have a line item if you have indirect costs, and then it will total up your total project cost. So this slide here shows what the CTAS budget summary will look like. It has a total for each budget category, as well it has a total, or should I say a summary for each purpose area that you are requesting funding for. So if you've completed your budget and you're reviewing it before you submit it to us for approval, you want to look at the budget summary to see if you see something that doesn't quite look right or doesn't add up. If you see something that doesn't quite look right, then you want to go back to your actual budget detail for that particular purpose area and make any corrections there. So let's talk about some of the reasons why budgets don't clear, the top 10 reasons why budgets don't clear. The budget detail worksheet is missing. That's going to be hard to do considering that more than likely you will be using the CTAS budget workbook and everything will be right there for you. The budget detail worksheet computations are correct. Although the budget detail worksheet is in an Excel format and it'll calculate the information for you or your calculations for you, there may be times that you may have inputted something wrong. Like I was reviewing a budget detail workbook last week, and in the travel category, the grantee had their lodging rates in the line item for their travel calculation. So of course, they put them in the wrong place, then the calculations are not going to be correct. Number 3, required match percentage has not been met nor source identified. I believe for the CTAS, you do not have a required match. However, I need to point out, even though a match is not required for CTAS, if you do decide to include a match in your budget and your budget has been approved, guess what? You now have an required match for your particular grant program. Unallowable costs are included in the detailed budget worksheet. Again, I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, you want to make sure that you do read through the CTAS solicitation. It does have a lot of detailed information on what you can and cannot include in your particular budget request. Required costs breakdown by categories has not been included. I mentioned earlier I was reviewing a budget, and in the equipment category, they had furniture. I had no idea what furniture they were buying, so you want to break things like that down so we know what you're exactly requesting so that it makes sense to us and that it's clear to us of what you're requesting in your budget.
Angela, can I interrupt for one quick second again?
Oh, certainly.
The first item that you mentioned, it was a very important one. If the budget is missing, but I want to point out for CTAS applicants, you won't even have to worry about the point of getting to Angela, because with CTAS, if you don't submit a budget, your application is automatically disqualified. You will not make it to peer review. There are 3 items that are absolutely required and must be submitted with your application, and that is one of them. If that is missing, you will be knocked out way before it even gets to being reviewed. So just want to let you know that when you're working on your budget, make sure you actually attach it so that it can be reviewed and move forward in the process. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, James. That's a very good point. Number 6, an incomplete budget narrative. Now, we saw a few examples of an incomplete budget narrative as we were going through these slides. You want to make sure that you provide plenty of detail, plenty of descriptions in your budget, explain your calculations so that we're clear in knowing what you are actually requesting. And it explains your calculations. Also, again, I have another example. I was reviewing a budget a few weeks ago. Although the budget detail and budget narrative are right there together, the applicant completed the budget detail section, but the budget narrative section was left blank. So you want to make sure you are filling out every section of the budget before you submit it. The next one, financial management internal control questionnaire form has not been submitted. If you have not submitted these items, we won't even be looking at your budget yet. It will automatically come back to you. So you want to make sure that you are including everything that is required to have with your application, including those questionnaire forms. I always recommend that you have a checklist available to make sure that you haven't forgotten anything. So once you've completed something, just go ahead and check it off your list. Prior budget did not clear. This actually refers to supplemental awards. If you have a supplemental award that you're applying for, then you want to make sure that if you had a budget prior to that, that all issues with that budget has been taken care of. A current federally approved indirect cost rate negotiated agreement has not been submitted. I just talked about that. If you are requesting indirect costs with your CTAS award, you want to make sure that you do attach a current approved indirect cost rate agreement with that. If you either don't include the agreement or if it's not current, then those costs that you have budgeted in the indirect cost category will be on hold. Responses to the initial budget review memo were insufficient. A lot of times when we're reviewing your budgets, we'll send it back for additional information. You want to make sure that you respond to every single question or every single issue that is sent back to you. If you are unsure about what was sent back to you or the questions that are being asked, just reach out to your program manager and they should be able to assist you with that. Another thing I want to point out with your budget that's not on the slide here, in an effort to make sure that it's clear and descriptive enough and concise enough, I always recommend that you find someone in your organization that's not attached to that part of your job or that part of the program, and have them take a look at your budget to make sure it makes sense to them. If it makes sense to them, and for someone who's not knowing what's going on, can read through your budget and can easily tell what you're requesting, then more than likely you are on the right track. This is my contact information if you need to reach out to me after this presentation, or if you have any questions in regards to the financial management of your grant or in regards to your budgets, please feel free to email me at angela.wade@usdoj.gov. Now we're going to open the floor up for questions.
And we do have some questions to start out with. And our first question is, how much space can we use in the budget form? And this is regarding a travel policy. Their travel policy is 18 pages long. They're wondering if they would need to include that in an appendix-like section and just and give a brief summary of those items in the budget form. What would be the best way for them to do that?
Thank you. That's a great question. For your travel policy, I said you need to tell us your travel policy, but you do not have to tell us your whole policy. Actually, you could be specific on the items, like you could tell us what your per diem rate you're using for your policy. You could just say a simple statement as, we're using the travel policy for the name of your organization. Our per diem rate for travel and meals is this. Our local travel is this. You can keep it just as simple as that.
Excellent. Thank you, Angela. And for baggage costs, where should baggage costs go in the budget? Would that go under travel in the other section or under airfare? Where should we put that?
Baggage costs for travel should go under other and just label it baggage fees. I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot to mention that when I was going in the travel category. Make sure that if you do have airfare costs, that you do include those baggage fees, and you want to include that under other and just label it as baggage fees.
Great. Thank you, Angela. And this one is regarding the budget worksheet and Purpose Area 1 specific budget worksheet. The section is grayed out and they cannot add additional narrative. It's not making sense that the Purpose Area 1 budget worksheet does not have the expanded narrative sections. The solicitation does require information, and they're not sure where to put the information that's being requested. They're asking, why does Purpose Area 1 not have the expanded narrative section in the workbook? And Angela, we do also have a representative from COP's office with us as well.
And I was going to refer that question to them.
Great. So for that question, please note that we do have an expanded narrative section just like the rest of the purpose areas. It's just under Purpose Area 1, there's actually only 4 sections where those bigger narrative boxes are grayed out. So please note, as you go into and enable the budget worksheet, and if you are going into Purpose Area 1, please review the entire budget worksheet. And please note there's only just 4 areas of the entire budget worksheet for Purpose Area 1 that is technically grayed out. The 4 bigger narrative boxes that are grayed out are for items if you're requesting in the travel, equipment, supplies, or other costs. And the reason for that is that the bigger, those only 4 bigger narrative boxes have been grayed out or disabled because we feel that you can put enough information and all the information that you need for those 4 sections in the specific line item narrative box, which so you should have enough space to provide your justification within the line item narrative box. So to answer that applicant's question, it is just 4 areas where you do not have to input the information in that bigger box, versus instead you're going to put it in the item narrative box. You will have plenty of room. We have, I believe, done this now for the past 2 years. So there should be sufficient space to provide your budget justification in the event that you are requesting for travel, equipment, supplies, and other costs. I hope that answers your question. Feel free if you have more. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And our next question is regarding capitalization and questions on if we meet the minimum cost of $5,000 and the use of 1 year, is that considered capitalization, or is it one or the other to qualify?
Great question. So for the federal policy, the minimal cost threshold for capitalizing equipment is $5,000 and 1 year in order for it to go into the equipment. So you really want to know, look and see what your organization's policy is. It may be different from the federal policy, so you want to check with your organization's policy for capitalizing equipment and see what their threshold is. But for the federal policy, it's a fair market value of $5,000 or more and a useful life of more than 1 year.
Great, thank you, Angela. And our next question is regarding equipment. And in the PowerPoint, we listed as an example, equipment had laptops under that section, and it was listed at $2,500 each. Wouldn't that fall underneath supplies then, according to the explanation provided?
So that was a great question. So in this example here, it has laptop computers under equipment, 2 items at $2,500 each. If we were following the federal policy, which is $5,000 or more, it would go under supplies. But if you go down to the narrative in this particular example, it says the capitalization policy threshold for this particular organization was $2,000. So according to this organization's capitalization policy, it would go under equipment because they capitalize anything $2,000 or greater.
Thank you, Angela. And this question is regarding Purpose Area 1. And in reviewing the previous year's budget, they had placed items underneath equipment instead of supplies due to the federal capitalization policy. And their organization follows the federal capitalization policy. Items included were high-priced, such as vehicles. They want to make sure that they understand the policy correctly, that all items over $5,000 would go into supplies. They also want to clarify that if an item is $4,999 per item, and they would want 10 of those items with a total cost of $49,990, would that go under equipment or supplies?
Sure, and Angela, feel free to also add in.
Okay.
I believe in general, as Angela mentioned, if a single item is $5,000 or more, that will generally fall under the equipment section. And if there are expendable items that are less than $5,000 or have like a shelf life of less than a year, etc., could fall under the supplies section. Please note that for this particular Purpose Area 1 applicant, please go ahead and submit what you're asking for. But I believe in general, equipment is items that are priced at, or one single priced item at 5,000 or more in the equipment, and anything less than 5,000 is considered supplies. And in the event that there is an error, when we do your budget review, we will contact you. So in the event that perhaps it was put in the wrong category, we will potentially make that switch. I hope that answers your question. And Angela, please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you were right on point.
Excellent. Thank you, Angela and Melissa. Our next question is regarding the narrative boxes in the budget narrative, and that is the narrative box under supplies, equipment, travel, and other costs is locked, and the narrative information cannot be entered. The copy that was downloaded from the website is the one that is giving the challenges. Is there an area where they can access a copy of the workbook that will allow narrative information to be entered?
My question is, this is James. Can the person that's asking that question, have you enabled the macros? Because I have the budget workbook open right now and I'm able to type freely into it in
And
the
I
areas
think,
in which you're saying.
I'm sorry, James.
No, go ahead. So that's my first question, so we can try and troubleshoot. Make sure that you enable the macros, not only when you open it on the website, but when you download it and save it. It may ask you to enable the macros again and make sure that you're doing it then too. And try that. If that does not work, let us know. We can get you in touch with our tech support to troubleshoot. But try those options first.
Yes. And I was also going to say, I think those 4 areas that the applicant mentioned, travel, equipment, supplies, and other costs, I believe that's what was mentioned. Those are the 4 grayed out areas within Purpose Area 1. And again, it's just the 4 narrative boxes, those bigger boxes that are grayed out. And you would complete your budget justification information. Instead of putting it in the big item box, you would put it in within the item narrative box. So it's just those 4 areas within Purpose Area 1 that is grayed out. You have the information. You will put the information in instead in the item narrative box.
Great. Thank you, Melissa, James, and Angela. Our next question is regarding COPS Purpose Area 1. Last year, this attendee received review comments in the budget category for the COPS Purpose Area 1, and that read that the cost effectiveness of the project was not addressed. They asked for a police officer, a vehicle for the police officer, and training. Is there any guidance you can provide on how to address that comment?
Sure. So my advice is to please review the solicitation. And as you're building your narrative, please look at, for your example, if it's for Purpose Area 1, please make sure that you respond to each of the Purpose Area 1 narrative questions, and also ensure that your budget worksheet is complete in terms of the who, the what, the why, what you need, the justification for why you need certain items. But ultimately, the peer reviewers will be reviewing primarily your narrative as well as your budget worksheet, as well as your profile and your timeline. So the comments that particular peer reviewer had it was their comments at the time based on the review. So we can't, we don't know. I believe that was based on their peer reviewer's assessment. So my advice is just take a look at the solicitation, make sure that you answer the narrative questions to the best of your ability, and provide information with your request. And again, I mean, ultimately, we do rely on our peer reviewers and their assessment. So I don't know if James would like to add more.
Sure.
But
sure, Melissa.
Thank
you for thank you. The other thing that I would say too, and I don't know your specific case, so I'm the person that asked that question. I'm going to speak to you and everyone just to give you a general way to think of this as well. So when the peer reviewers give, comments, like the comments we clean them up, to a certain degree. They're basically what they said, but, we check for punctuation and make sure there aren't inappropriate words and things of that nature, because we would never want that kind of stuff translated down. But keep in mind, there's a variety of peer reviewers that review your application. That could be the thought of one person or 2 out of 3 or 4. It could also be a situation where even despite that comment, it could just simply be that you didn't get funded because COPS or whatever office may have ran out of money, because that happens sometimes. Like, we can't always fund every good application that we get, even though we want to. Sometimes we just simply run out of money. There's like not enough left, or if it's, between 2 applications and one application may have scored 1 or 2 points higher, it makes a difference sometimes. And so I would say don't, beat yourself up too much. I would say just pull out your whole application, look at it, refer it to or compare it to the solicitation, and then try to finish your application probably, if possible, 2 to 3 weeks beforehand, so that you can give yourself a couple of days, read it with a fresh eye, have another group of people look at it, and just kind of act like you're the peer reviewer yourself, or that you're the federal staff, and do I feel like I'm meeting what they're asking for? Almost kind of do your own peer review of your application. I often tell that to applicants, and a lot of them write me back and tell me that they find it very helpful, instead of kind of assuming that they got it right, waiting to the last minute, doing it and turning it in without really assessing it before they turn it in, would be my advice. I certainly don't want you to be discouraged, and, definitely try. If you run into any specific questions with COPS or anyone else, definitely reach out to tribalgrants@usdoj.gov, and we'll put you in touch with the POC for that purpose area. If it's a matter of you needing to understand more of like what they're asking for, or something in the solicitation doesn't make sense, we certainly want you to get that clarity. The only thing that I want to caveat or put out there is, we're here to be as helpful as we can, but we cannot, you can't send us a narrative or an abstract and ask us to review that. We're legally not allowed to do that. But if you have a question about what the purpose area allows, or what kind of things we're thinking about in the purpose area, we can answer those types of things, technical, programmatic, but we can't evaluate anything that you may have written to let you know if you're on the right track for that. We can't do, because it would be considered giving an unfair advantage, because not everybody's getting that. And so we have to try and remain as unbiased as possible when we're doing this, but we are certainly here to help. And so, yes, hopefully me and Melissa's answer has helped you out, but we do not want you to be discouraged. We want you to apply. We don't want you to get upset or frustrated. Just make sure you leave enough time to review your application. And then If you feel like after reviewing it, there's things that stick out and you want to get more clarity from cops or whatever office, yeah, reach out to them and see if they can clarify exactly what they're looking for from you, but in a manner in which they can answer the question. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Melissa. Our next question is regarding the financial questionnaire. And with the financial questionnaire that was recently added to the OJP website, it's different than in the past in the fact that it has to be completed on a web-based PDF form, and it does not save all of the data entered once the PDF is downloaded. For example, organization name is missing, the yes/no entries don't display. Is this going to be fixed, or is there a different location that we should be accessing this form?
Whoever asked that question, this is James. Shoot me an email and I will look into it, and then I will, if I need to work with my finance department or Angela to get an updated form, I will. I know that it was working, but I can certainly check. Have no problem doing that for you. So whoever that is, just send me an email and we will get you what you need. And my email address is james.smith@usdoj.gov.
And as James mentioned, this is Angela. You can reach out to me as well. And I believe you should already have my email address.
Great. Thank you, James, and thank you, Angela. And regarding construction, it is very clear that construction is generally not allowed, but however, renovations are sometimes permitted. How can your agency check or validate the amount and scope of work for renovations? And are they required to submit an accredited list of contractors?
I don't want to take an educated guess on this question, but whoever asked it, I assure you I can get you an answer. If you didn't hear my email address before, send me your exact question to my email. I will put you directly in touch with the person who is responsible for that purpose area so that you can ask that question directly to them. My email address is james.a.smith@usdoj.gov. If you shoot me the question now, I'll forward it over to the person right now. Not sure if they'll be able to respond immediately, but I can assure you that I will send it to them as soon as you send it to me.
Great, thank you, James. And while we wait for additional questions, just a few reminders for everyone. The recording for this webinar, as well as previous webinars, will be posted on the Office of Justice Programs YouTube channel. You can access that at www.youtube.com/user/OJPOCOM. And please remember, it can take up to 10 business days for the CTAS webinars to post on the YouTube channel. And for those of us who were with us last week on the webinar, you heard that the Just Grants webinar had been was postponed. We do have a new date for that webinar. It's been rescheduled for Wednesday, February 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can register for this webinar by using the registration link on the pre-application webinar schedule that has been updated and is posted on www.justice.gov/tribal/open-solicitations. And we have another question. With the Applying in Just Grants webinar, are we automatically going to be rescheduled for the new date on February 17th? And for that, your registration, if you are already registered, your registration will automatically transfer over for the webinar on the 17th. The next question is regarding Purpose Area 1, and that is regarding the data conversion. Would data conversion for police records management systems be applied to other or contracts? We would be working toward converting information from old records management system to a newer record management system.
Sure. I think you could apply for that request under contracts. I assume you might need a contract or service to do that for you. So yes, please feel free to add it under the contracts.
Thank you, Melissa. And there was a request to repeat the YouTube address, and that YouTube address for the CTAS webinars recordings is www.youtube.com/user/OJPOCOM. And just a few additional reminders. Just Grants will also be offering additional application submission webinars. So if you're not able to join us on Wednesday, February 17th, there will be additional webinars in February and in March. You can access their webinar schedule to register for these sessions at www.justgrants.us.training-resources/grants-training/submission. And there was a comment on, they're currently not registered on Just Grants. They contacted the Just Grants help desk and they indicated that that's by invite only. It's been weeks since the request was submitted, and they're just looking to see if there's any other way to register in the Just Grants platform.
So my advice is, depending on, I would recommend that they reach out, depending if this is a COPS award, to call our response center, which is on the screen here, 1-800-421-6770. There's also, I believe, an OJP response center and OVW response center. And you could speak to your program manager to help you get access into registering and getting set up in Just Grants. Yeah, I'm not sure which award recipient or which agency, which federal agency this person is asking about, but perhaps if they do have an award package, there should be a point of contact or program manager who can try to help the person or the department get access into Just Grants.
Great, thank you, Melissa. We do have some of the contact information here on the screen. So if needed, we have the emails as well as the phone numbers.
And I actually just found, Christina, the OJP and OVW support numbers. So again, the person who sent in the question, if it's an OJ, so 1-866-655-4482 or 833-872-5175, which is the same as the Just Grant support number. I think the 833-872-5175 is the OJP support number, and then the 866-655-4482 is OVW's. So if you have an OJP or OVW award, perhaps reach out there to try to get assistance into registering and getting set up in Just Grants. Or if you have a COPS awardee and need help, feel free to call the response center, which is listed on the screen at 1-800-421-6770. We have grants management specialists who can assist in trying to get you squared away in Just Grants.
Great, thank you, Melissa. And for submitting an application, will the full submission be done in Just Grants for all purpose areas?
Yes, but let me just be very clear. So there's two parts that you're going to do in grants.gov, and that's your SF424 and your SFLLL. Those two things must be done via grants.gov, and then everything else for all of the purpose areas is in Just Grants. Yes.
Thank you, James. And A reminder for this year, with the two-step application process, applications must be submitted in grants.gov by March 16th. So the first part must be submitted in grants.gov by March 16th by 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And the full application must be submitted in Just Grants by March 30th by 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, for any kind of technical assistance in submitting the full application in Just Grants, you can visit their website at justicegrants.usdoj.gov. So that's www.justicegrants.usdoj.gov. They have additional online resources on their website, and they also have their service desk number, which is also on the screen here, which is 833-872-5175. The FAQs are available on the website. So if you would like to see this, any additional information on solicitation requirements, you can go ahead and see the frequently asked questions document that is located at www.justice.gov/tribal/open-solicitations. And the next webinar is scheduled on Thursday, February 11th. That's at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. The topic of the next webinar is Purpose Area 1, which is the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services. And do any of our presenters or panelists have additional tips that they would like to share?
Just some closing kind of overall things to think about. Start your application early. Keyword, key phrase, start early. Don't wait till the last minute. Waiting till the last minute, you are prone to make mistakes. I see it every year. Folks have good faith efforts, but they're rushing, to get everything in that day or the 10th hour, and they make all kinds of crazy, easy mistakes to make. And unfortunately, there's nothing we can do. We feel bad if you simply forget to attach something, but that's not fair to applicants who have prepared and got their stuff in a reasonable amount of time and didn't have to rush. So I say that because I want everyone to do well. Start early. Get your team together. Figure out who's going to work on this application. Everybody should be meeting periodically at points to come together to see how you're doing. Meet at the end before you turn it in. Do a thorough review. Try to get it done 2 weeks beforehand. Act like you are the review board, the review panel, compared against the purpose area and compared against the solicitation to see if you're on target. Look at the checklist that we put in the solicitation. Make sure that you have all the pieces. I'll give you another example of things that happen all the time. So the purpose area narrative for each purpose area in which you're applying to, the budget detail workbook and budget narrative template, and the tribal and community justice profile are the three things that if you do not turn in one of them, you will not be able to move forward to peer review. And I've seen that happen several times, and we feel really bad, but we have to put some criteria in place, and we go over these things several times in the webinar. We star them in the solicitation, and each office goes over it in their individual webinar. So just please pay attention. Make your own checklist if you need to. Triple check everything. If you are turning in a purpose area narrative, make sure that it's for the correct purpose area, because while you'll get through with turning in one, you still need to, that's only half the battle. You need to make sure it's the correct one, because if you turn in one for purpose area 3 and it's really purpose area 6 that you've turned in twice, there's nothing we can do about that. So it's those kind of things that you need to triple check, and that by finishing your application early, it minimizes your chances of making those kind of mistakes. We are here for you. Email us at tribalgrants@usdoj.gov. Don't worry, no question is a stupid question. We want to hear from you. It is our job to help you as much as we can, but just know that we cannot review any materials. We're not allowed to do that, but we can answer questions all day. I encourage you to tune into the Just Grants webinar that we have specifically for CTAS, as well as you should have gotten information or will be getting information on the other series of 10 how to submit applications and Just Grants webinars that are happening over the course of the next month and a half. So you'll get a CTAS specific one, but if you're anything like me, practice makes perfect. So I definitely encourage you to attend the additional sessions as well, with these systems being new to all of us. I will also let you guys know the solicitation this year that was created by the Just Grant system looks a little different than CTAS solicitations that you have seen from us in the past, and we recognize that. And it's a thing where all of our solicitations are looking a little different because, we're working out kinks and getting used to the new system. So by later today or sometime tomorrow, worst case scenario, Thursday, be on the lookout in your emails. Check the Tribal Safety and Justice website. You may get it in an email twice, but we have put together a purpose area spotlight document for you. And essentially, it just gives more detail on each of the purpose areas. And for those of you who have applied to CTAS last year and in previous years, when you see this spotlight document, it'll look very familiar to you. It's normally how our solicitation looks, but we didn't want to confuse you by putting out 2 solicitations. So we cut out all the other stuff and left the important purpose area information, because that's what we want to make sure that you truly understand when you are trying to decide which purpose area you're going to apply to, or if a certain purpose area fits your need. We wanted you to have the meat and potatoes of each purpose area. So definitely, and we'll get that information to Fox Valley as well, so they can blast it out to everyone who was on this call. We'll make sure you get it. And if I have anything to do with it, you'll probably get it several times, but we just want to make sure that you are well equipped. Read, plan. I can't say those things enough, and I keep preaching those things because the 10 years I've been working on CTAS, I see the same thing every year. And so, the best advice is to work early, get a good team together, have a checklist, create deadlines for yourself. And it's not enough to say, and I'm going to say something else about deadlines really quick, but it's not enough to say the CTAS application is due March 30th. If you really want to be proactive, you'd say it's due 3 weeks before it's actually due. And then each little piece that you're creating a checklist for, like if you say to yourself, okay, I want to have the budget done 2 weeks before the CTAS application is done, really then have it done even a week earlier before when you really want to have it done. So you kind of set deadlines for your deadlines. I used to do that in grad school all the time, and it helped me stay on track. And that way it's like you never really miss a deadline. But what I wanted to say about deadlines in particular this year is that there's 3 kind of 2 real deadlines and 1 kind of quasi deadline that I need you to pay attention to, and I'm going to say it probably like 2 times, and it's in the solicitation. So the first deadline that you need to think about and remember and mark on your Outlook or Google calendars is March 16th. That deadline is for going into grants.gov and setting that up and doing, what you need to do in there. So remember, March 16th, grants.gov deadline. In the solicitation, there's all kinds of contact information for grants.gov if you get stuck or need help with certain things or technical support. So March 16th, grants.gov deadline. March 30th is when the CTAS solicitation closes, and you will not be able to submit an application after 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. However, there's a caveat to that. If you don't do the grants.gov piece, you won't even have the possibility of applying to CTAS because the 2 parts work together. So you have to do the grants.gov piece first, then you'll get what you need to get in order to be able to do everything in grants and Just Grants. So March 16th, grants.gov deadline. March 30th, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when the CTAS solicitation closes for FY20. And then the kind of deadline that's not really a deadline, but it is a deadline, I want you to think of it as a deadline, is February 26th. And that's for more so for folks, well, I'm not even going to say more so. It's for folks who don't have any current grants with us, or their grants are old and they don't have a Just Grants account and any active awards. You will need to set up a Just Grants account. Just Grants account. And so we strongly recommend that you do that by February 26th. This system is new, and as with any new thing, technology is both a blessing and a curse. There's bugs. And so if you register before, well, really we want you to do it before February 26th, but definitely by February 26th, because we figure that gives you a little over a month. If you have technical difficulties, our office can work with you in figuring it out. But if you wait till the day before or the week before or the day of to do this, it's not going to look good for you if you have technical issues. So we're just trying to encourage you to be proactive and try to allow as much time as possible if issues pop up, so that we will be able to assist you. So again, I'm going to say the deadlines again because this is new for us. March 16th, grants.gov deadline. March 30th, CTAS FY 2021 closes at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on March 30th. For anyone who doesn't currently have a Just Grants account, you want to make sure that you get one set up before or by February 26th. If you already have current grants in the Just Grants account, you can forget that last or ignore that last deadline that I just said. It won't apply to you. Only for folks who don't currently have a Just Grants account that we encourage you to, register as early as possible for that. So I encourage you to put each and every one of these deadlines on your Google Calendar, on your Outlook calendar. If you want to be old school like me, I do all three, and I also use a Post-it, but it helps me. So I am always here. I won't pretend to know everything about every purpose area, but I do know quite a bit about CTAS. If I can't answer your question directly, I will get you in touch with the person that does. And I know that I've given my personal work email address out several times. I don't have a problem with anybody emailing me. I will ask you to do this, though, first. Email tribalgrants@usdoj.gov. They are well equipped to get you what you need. If for some strange reason you are not getting a response as quickly as you would like, reach out to me. I can take care of getting it. Sometimes folks are off, or, we can get you what you need. And I don't mind you reaching out to me at all. But we also want to push you to use that kind of main email address that we have for CTAS. But I'm certainly here to try to get you any help that you need. I think that's it for me.
And James, there was a question for some clarification with the deadlines. And someone had noted that the deadlines seem to change back and forth in grants.gov to April 13th, and just wanted some clarification on what the final deadline is.
Okay, so there was a mistake that should not have happened, and we got it corrected very quickly. So it's back to the original deadlines. It should have never been changed, and we don't plan for it to change again unless there's something that forces us, like bad weather or too many technical issues, and we may, but for all intentional purposes, March 16th is the deadline for registering in grants.gov, and the solicitation is closing on March 30th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If any of those deadlines change, we will let you know. We will definitely let you know. And if for some strange reason you see anything out there or get some kind of weird notification that you are unsure of, you can always email me for the deadline. Anyone who may have looked at our Tribal Safety and Justice website, well, not our Tribal Safety and Justice website, anyone who may have looked at grants.gov late last Monday, early Tuesday, possibly early Wednesday of last week, you would have saw that confusing change, but that is now corrected back to the original date. So don't disregard that version of the solicitation. If you downloaded it on last Tuesday or Wednesday, grants.gov now has the correct version again. And if there's ever any question, the Tribal Safety and Justice website always had the correct version. It never changed on there. So, but again, March 16th, grants.gov deadline. March 30th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when the solicitation closes. And for those folks who do not currently have any grants with DOJ or are new to DOJ or new to Just Grants, then you're not going to have a Just Grants account and you're going to need to create one. And so the February 26th deadline is for those folks because we want you to do that as early as possible to allow any time to help you if there are technical issues. But like I said, if you already have a Just Grants account, you can ignore the February 26th kind of deadline because it doesn't apply to you. Hopefully that clears things up for the person that had that question.
Thank you, James. And we do have the upcoming webinars on the current screen here. If we can forward one more screen, that provides the upcoming Just Grants webinar sessions. So if anyone does need that information, those dates are available on this screen, along with the link to go ahead and register for those webinars. And that link is also located in the chat box. And did any of our other panelists or presenters have additional information or tips that they would like to share?
I just want to add one more thing, because I think James pretty much covered it all. Thank you, James. I just want to say again, it's very important that they read through the solicitation and pay attention to the purpose areas that they're applying for specific budget information. And again, I will always recommend that they keep that handy as they're completing that budget so they don't forget and leave something important that they are required to include in that budget out. And I just want to reiterate again that once you finish filling out your budget, have someone else in your organization look at it to make sure that it makes sense to them before you submit it. Thank you.
I just wanted to say, for folks who applied for Purpose Area 1 in previous years, when you filled out the budget worksheet, there was also a tab for the demographic questions. And I just wanted to share for anybody who's interested in applying for Purpose Area 1 this year, the budget worksheet, of course, is still the same, but we actually took out the demographic questions out of the budget worksheet. So the demographic questions for only Purpose Area 1 applicants, you will actually fill out and answer those questions within the Just Grants application itself. And we also uploaded the actual demographic questions if you want to take a look at them. They are on our Tribal Justice website. And if you also want to go to our COPS homepage, we also have those questions. But I just wanted to let you know there is a minor change to the budget worksheet for Purpose Area 1 applicants. The demographic questions are no longer attached to the budget worksheet.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Angela. And thank you, James. Appears there's no additional comments at this time. We would like to thank everyone for joining us today. As a reminder, the recorded copy of today's webinar will be available within 10 business days, and that will be available at www.youtube.com/user/OJPOCOM. Thank you again for joining us today, and we hope to see you at future webinars. Thank you.